the growing role of Black women in shaping the future. As all of you know who have joined us tonight, we are on the precipice of something great. We are on the precipice of something monumental and historic. So many have paved the way for this moment for Miss Kamala Debbie Harris to potentially become the first African-American and Indian-American woman president of these United States of America. You know the one I'm talking about, that Black job. My name is Crystal Wagger. I am a lawyer and a lobbyist with the Southern Group, the largest lobbying practice in the state of Florida. And we are gathered here tonight to discuss the merits of getting involved as Black women and empowering other Black women as well as yourself to get engaged in all forms of leadership. I come from that train of thought. It's actually because of my decision to get involved in my community that I found myself volunteering for then Senator Obama. And that journey led me to find my husband. He was appointed by President Obama to serve as U.S. Ambassador to Singapore. And in my role as the ambassador's wife, I learned diplomacy. I learned how to represent my country, and especially had the opportunity to show what it was like to be an African American in this country. And I could have been prouder. Upon our return, I came home with two little girls, 8 months and 3 years old. And I remember Barack Obama saying, "Be the change you want to see." So in that moment, I decided to throw my hat into the ring to run for office in my own community. The intent of mine was only to encourage others, women and other minorities, to throw their name in the hat, run for office, be the change you want to see. What ultimately ended up happening, and I'm proud to say, and I'm humbled to say, is that I won the most amount of votes in the village's 89-year history. I also became the first African-American mayor in the same 89-year history of the village of Miami Shores. That's a little bit about me, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that 14 years ago, because of my choices to get activated and politically active, raising the little bit of money that I could, 14 years ago, I held a fundraiser for Kamala Harris here in South Florida. It was me and 5 people, and then she was running for Attorney General. I just wanted to empower her with a showcase of people that were willing to write checks for her in Florida. And lo and behold, 14 years later, here we are. Now with that, I have to introduce our esteemed panel for this evening. We are going to have a wonderful conversation, an intellectual conversation, a thoughtful conversation with tastemakers in various spaces. First, let me introduce you to Ms. Charlene Sinclair, who is an extraordinary organizer, a leader, a strategist. She takes deep dives into the intersection of race and economic justice. She is the founder of Facing Race, a national conference, which this year will be in St. Louis. Charlene, how you doing?
I am doing well, but I have to correct you. Race Forward is
Race,
the organization that runs Facing Race.
Facing Race.
So I don't
Tell
want
us a
people to
little,
think I'm trying to take their stuff.
not at all. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Charlene.
Thank you so much. It's so wonderful to be here with you all. I have always called myself a community organizer, even before Barack Obama made it very special and famous. So I got into organizing similar to how you got into politics. I was in a community that needed a whole lot of help. And as a result of that, it was actually a woman by the name of Marie Kirkley Bay, who was a leader in the community herself. She had been involved in community organizing, and we were working at the Aetna Life and Casualty together. And she was going to run for city council. And she asked me to just join her and knock on some doors. And I knocked on doors for Marie, and that led to her not only winning her seat, but eventually going into the state house and become one of the highest ranking women there as a former welfare mom. And being a former welfare mom myself, that whole process committed me to understanding the role of women in really creating important change in their communities at all levels. And so I proudly say that I'm a community organizer, and over the years have become a community organizer that has done a deep dive into the relationship of faith and liberation and power building. So I am very happy to be here with you all tonight.
Thank you. We're happy that you're joining us. We can't wait to see what you have to say. I love this. Next up, we have my very dear friend, Miss Terry Williams. She's the president and CEO of One United Bank, America's largest Black-owned bank. Terry and I have worked together on several projects, but one of the things we have done, because she puts her money where her mouth is co-hosting along with two other friends, a fundraiser for our very own Congresswoman, Miss Frederica Wilson. Hi, Terry, welcome.
Hi, Crystal, and welcome to you. I'm glad we're here together.
Thank you. You want to tell us a little bit more, Terry?
Yeah, sure. So I also have to correct you. I am not the CEO, I'm the COO, but I'm also the owner of One United Bank. So I want to put that in there because ownership is so important to our community. In my background, I typically start with introducing myself by my resume, which is, I went to Brown University, majored in economics. I went to Harvard Business School and graduated top of my class, worked in corporate America, and then bought a bank, bought 4 banks actually. But really, my background really starts with my great-grandmother. We called her Ma Honey. Her name was Annie Coachman. And we're from this small town, Indiantown, Florida. And she owned a barbecue pit, a juke joint, a penny candy store, and some real estate. And I used to follow her around as a kid. And I realized, really in my older age, I realized that she is the reason that I own this bank and that I have become an entrepreneur and done all the things that I've done. And I say that story because I really want everyone out there to think about the Ma Honeys in their life. Because we all have a Ma Honey, someone who inspired us from a very young age to be who we are.
Wow, thank you. Thank you. And last but not least, Dr. Carrie Mitchell Brown, AKA KMB. She is the architect of tonight's discussion, and we are grateful for her for putting this together. Dr. Brown focuses on creating equitable and inclusive cultures for organizations across the country. Now, I'm not going to say much more than that because I want to make sure I get it right. Dr. Brown, please tell us a bit more about yourself, and thank you for putting this together.
Thank you, Crystal. Thank you, Dr. Charlene Sinclair, and thank you, Terry. This amazing conversation wouldn't be possible without having the 3 of you by my side and the circle making it happen. So KMB, I have my own consultancy now after many years working in a variety of organizations. But one thing has been true for me is how do we make Black women figural? What does that mean? How are we fully seen? How are we fully heard, respected, valued? And throughout my entire career, we've gotten silly questions as to, well, what do we do for Black women? Well, what do you do for everyone else to make them successful, right? There's no magical tool, but obviously there are things that you must pay attention to at the intersection of race and gender and the unique challenges that Black women face in life, in the world, in workplaces. But you pour into Black women the same way you pour into all other leaders that you want to develop in the workforce, that you want to develop in the education system, that you want to develop in communities, in businesses, all of the things. And so we are answering those mysterious questions tonight and every night. You just don't pick us up off the street. This is not like trading places. And so it's like, oh, we need somebody to fill in here. It takes years to cultivate leaders, and we have been in this period of cultivation. And so I spend my time partnering with leaders, walking alongside Black women who now have had the opportunity to lead, to support them in their leadership to have someone who is unwavering, to be strategic, to have their back. During the times where they need it most, where they feel isolated, where they, need the support on making it. But I won't continue on. Let's get into our conversation. Thank you, Crystal.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. We'll get straight to it. We're going to just be talking a little bit about historical context, because Black women have historically taken the lead on many, many moments in this country's history, from leading and still not being seen. They led and weren't seen in the women's suffrage movement, but they still led. We led the Black Lives Matter moment and movement. I have hosted Isabel Wilkerson, the author of Caste, and she herself actually said, Crystal, let me talk to you about unknown, unseen, unheard historical moments that Black women have led with little to no support, but still persevered, right? In their respective fights. The idea that we are overqualified and then we're often considered underqualified. I'd like to explore how we draw inspiration from those who went before us and how our resilience and strength is informed by our past. Terry, what do you think about that? What are your thoughts on how we are informed by our past and our resilience?
So there's a part of me that comes to this conversation with a little bit of anger.
Mm.
And that anger is the degree to which we are undervalued, where our role is underappreciated, and where, a lot of times we have to fight for the recognition of not just ourselves, but our community. And I am definitely focused on Black Lives Matter. This was back in 2015, where the bank, One United Bank, became a supporter of Black Lives Matter. And when I say supporter, I mean a financial supporter, a active supporter. But at the time, Black Lives Matter was considered to be a terrorist organization. And in fact, when we approached them, we were a little bit concerned because we didn't want to commercialize their movement. But at the same time, they came to us and said, no other bank will support us. And what I found was women who started that movement and women and that movement were consistently undervalued, unappreciated. And it just, I just feel like we're tired of that. The same thing happened with Kamala. And, we all saw it, where everyone was saying, oh, if he steps down, and they were coming up with names of different, and I'm gonna be direct, white men that, could step in. And I was like, wait a minute, we have a VP and she's completely qualified, in fact, more qualified than a lot of the men that you're mentioning that have never run for national office. So I come to this conversation with a little bit of anger about the fact that we constantly have to prove ourselves when we know, all of us Black women know how strong we are.
Mm-hmm. That's right. That's right. The fact that they would consider other people when she's the sitting vice president was diabolical. Charlene, I wonder what your thoughts are on this issue.
Thank you. Terry, I really appreciate you saying that you come to this with a level of anger, because I think, I also come to it with a little level of anger and frustration, because it is always a fact that Black women are behind, inside of, and around so many of the strong movements that have moved our democracy forward. And, one of the things that I'm very angry about and frustrated about is also this word of resiliency, because it means that there is pain that we endure to be able to get there. And I would love to think that we can show our power, our strength, our creative, strategic, brilliant mind without having to go through so much pain. Black Lives Matter began because of the pain of women losing their children.
Yeah.
And I actually remember that part of being in the circle with Alicia and Patrice and Opal, because we were all part of a movement of organizations that were learning how to stand strong and be bold. It was bold. And the conversation pulled all of us into I think we were a conference call back then. I don't think we were Zooming. We were on a conference call. But what I remember was the call was pulled together so that we could cry, so that we could be in a place where tenderness and support would be present. And then we had to go back out there and then be in the street. And so my frustration is that our brilliance is often overshadowed. And then we get, tossed by this conversation around resiliency without people recognizing the enforced pain that they had placed on us for us to even get there, right? And we see it over and over and over again. And so I thank you for opening up that conversation and allowing us to be angry and frustrated and not always have to kind of put on the, oh, we are strong and we will overcome. Yeah, we'll do all those things too, but we're also mad.
That's right. That's right. Listen, that sort of leads to the next thought, because throughout our shared histories, as African Americans in this country, we have countless examples of us existing in vulnerable spaces, right? There is so much unspoken, to your point, Charlene, unspoken trauma, which has been passed down because of the attacks on our person, on our bodies, on our education, on our housing options, on our economics, right? More often than not, we've attempted to build wealth and it's taken away. There's always a backlash, or we are shortchanged. We are redlined. We are bamboozled into signing mortgages that aren't mortgages, but they're contracts. So you miss one payment, you're put out of your home that you think you own. The guarantor is white, and they carry on that with the next Black person, right? And so there's this collective feeling, there's this collective trauma that we share. Yet we as Black women, we tend to push forward, push through for our families, for our communities. We're always pushing for equity. I wonder, Dr. Brown, in that sort of context, as it relates to the disparity in equity, what do you think our vulnerabilities are, and how have we managed to move past them?
Yeah, I don't know if we've managed to move past them as much as it just manifests in various ways around leadership, right? So it often does emerge from some very devastating circumstances that affect us, whether it's anger, whether it's things that have happened to our loved ones, ourselves, our communities, but our commitment for just making sure that what happens to us doesn't happen to someone else or is not replicated. That's kind of like our resolve. So if we think about the times that this is reflected, it's often our darkest time. So if we think about Mamie Till Mosley, for example, she was minding her own business, but her bravery to mobilize her community in pursuit of justice because somebody messed with her son. Someone killed her son, right? And Stacey Abrams, like her efforts to really galvanize public engagement around democracy and full participation in our democracy because something was wrong. There were systemic barriers to participating on purpose. Right. And so those things were detrimental. It was a huge loss. It was a hard fight, a huge loss, but she didn't just go away. And so it's like, how do we, take that? So our passion and insert it with leadership. I mean, we continue to challenge the status quo in everything that we do. And we do it in our own way, right? So there's no one way, no one model for Black women, which is amazing, right? And so it's this many ways that we just go at it. We're not a monolith, but the thing that is consistent is that we move forward on a path for equity, making sure that people have what they need. How often do you hear, do you have what you need? What do you need? How can I get it for you? Do you have what you need? And it's not just for ourselves, but it's for everyone. Sometimes even at our own peril, it's for everyone else, including those who don't even reciprocate those same values.
Hmm. Terry,
Crystal?
I feel like you have something to add to that. Please do.
No, I thought of someone that I think needs to be spoken. Her name needs to be included in this, which is Nicole Hannah-Jones.
Ah,
Oh,
And
yes,
yes, and the
Yeah.
1619 Project.
yes.
You know, and so much can be taken from that project, but for me, the most important is that we are not the problem. We are actually the solution. And when I say we, I mean Black people have constantly fought to make this country a better place. And, you know, former President Barack Obama, our president, also talks about that we continue to focus on improving this democracy. And Black women in particular have been at the forefront of that. And so that's another movement, another sort of stake in the ground that Nicole Hannah-Jones really put for all of us to really turn the table and say, wait a minute, look at our history and how much we've contributed.
And that's a great point. And even when we look, she took the time to collate all that data about our history and then was still questioned
Yes.
about the
yes.
validity of the history that she took the time to write about.
Right.
Right?
Create a whole curriculum
A
on it.
whole curriculum, a children's book, everything.
Right.
Charlene, do you have thoughts on this? Because don't get me started on that. That was
Yeah, I mean, this is part of the frustration, right? I have a couple of thoughts on it. You know, one is that the importance of understanding our history
Mhm.
and the fact that she got so much pushback should
Yeah.
indicate to us how precious our history is.
Mm.
Because if it wasn't that valuable and that precious, they would not have pushed back so aggressively. And we're seeing it with the level of censorship and with the book banning that is happening now, with the desire to actually erase Black history in this country. So that is extremely important. And you know, I think it's important because and Dr. Carey will remember this, when we began to do citizenship schools with leaders and organizers in communities across the country, one of the things that kept coming up was young people saying that this country didn't belong to them. They actually believed that they had no right to demand from this country what was their due, because they said, is this my flag? Is this my country? These were young Black people.
Right.
And so we had to go back to history to show them the level to which Black people not only fought for our own freedom, but continue to fight for freedom, and through that pull everyone else towards a greater union as a result of that. You know, Black people are central to the creation of democracy in this country, to the creation of it. It's still a project.
Right.
We have not arrived. Clearly, we are in a moment that is showing that we have not arrived. And the one thing that I would say, because you know, I'm becoming a news junkie. Every election cycle, I'm a real news junkie. I don't want to miss anything.
Right.
And the news is talking about, you know, are we heading towards a civil war, right, in this moment? And I want to say, well, you better hope not, because Black people will kick your tail, because that's what we did then too. So, but that is important for Black people to recognize that we could not have gotten closer to democracy if Black people didn't decide that they were going to just join that army and force the Union to actually, you know, do something, right? And what we have to understand too, that the fight was a fight for can we give Black people political rights? Part of why we devolved to the states now was the recognition that Black freedom rested on political rights. And so we don't talk to our young people, talk to our older people, talk to our more mature people about the fact that this is a multi-centuried fight to keep Black people from being full participant in the democratic project. Then we might say this ain't for us. But you know, so I think that's what is churning for me now. It's like that history has to be reclaimed. It has to be taught. We have to do it in communities. We have to sit with folks. It cannot just be in ivory towers. It has to be in community centers and churches, etc. It's a part of the history that we have to go back and reclaim. The fact that we've always huddled in, hush harbors and church basements and community centers,
Yeah.
and we need to do that again.
Well, I mean, I think you make very good points, and it leads to my next question, actually. We're talking about the tools, right? The tools, the pillars. The pillars of power, right? Pillars of power, tools that are used to identify institutions and individuals that support our advocacy or our positions. There are several other definitions of pillars of powers. That's just one, right? But I'm specifically speaking about pillars of power that encompass legacy, activism, and politics. And what are those best practices? So Dr. Brown, I'd like to throw that question out to you. What are those pillars of power? Where do we find them? How do we embrace them? How do we share them?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, one of the things that we talked about in the citizenship schools, one thing is key: know how the system works. Right? You have to understand how the political system works so you know what levers to push. And we see that time and time again, especially during this time when people are saying, well, what can Kamala do for me? Or what has she done in the last 3.5 years? Well, she hadn't been president in the last 3.5 years. So her role as vice president is not to sign executive orders. Her role is to do what's delegated to her by the president. But if you don't know that,
Mm-hmm.
then it's really easy to begin to spread, misinformation. So it's to know how the system works, to know how change happens, and to definitely get involved. So that is one key: to know how the system works, and to be involved. There's another thing around not spreading misinformation, to do
Yes.
your research. We also saw on TikTok, for those who oppose Kamala Harris in 2020 because of her prosecutorial record, there was numbers and upwards of 400,000 Black men that she put in jail, when the fact was it was less than 100 for
Less than 50,000.
and so just really understanding and doing your own research. And the thing that Charlene offered is, how do we get back? One of the things that we used to say is Black people had done more to secure their own freedom than they once got credit for, because Lincoln was not that dude. Like, how often do we say that Lincoln freed the enslaved? Well, no, he didn't, right? And so, understanding your history. So that's, first and foremost for me, is to learn how the system works. And we don't always have to go, so far in the history books. Sometimes we can just look really close to home, right? Really, really great examples in our mothers, in our grandmothers, in our great grandmothers. And it's still within us, it's still in, our DNA. I know for myself in particular, and specifically, the sacrifices that they've made so I can have a little bit of head start. And if I don't do nothing, right,
Okay.
I have to do my work so that I can give my daughters a little bit more of a head start than what I had, right? And so there are things that are within our control. It doesn't require big college degrees. It doesn't require, high paying jobs. We all have the ability.
That's right.
See something, in New York, when I worked in New York, it's like, you see something, you say something. In the subway, you see something, you say something. Well, if you see something that feels funny and not in a good way, guess what? You can do something about it, right? And partner with folks that are willing to do it with you as well. Small change, large change, none of it happens alone.
Thank you. I agree. I think engagement, political engagement is one pillar. And I think there's another one around economics that we really have to begin to pay attention to and have to begin to learn more about for ourselves. For example, I didn't really know much about, my parents didn't tell me how much they made, and I got a bank account, but I wasn't getting a financial education necessarily. So Terry, I wonder if you can speak a little bit to that about economic empowerment as a pillar of power.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, money is power, and money has a purpose. And, for us, at One United Bank, and I think, all of us can attest to this, our focus is really financial literacy. And our goal is to make financial literacy a core value in the Black community. When we were growing up, they taught home economics in school. They no longer do that, So our kids are growing up, really, they're hearing about money, all these rap songs about money, but they really don't know how to make money. They really don't know how to save, spend, invest, And so we really are focusing on, we really want financial literacy to be taught in all schools across the country. And the other part of that is just, Dr. Brown was talking about misinformation. We have to realize that a lot of the foundation that we have as a community is false information about money. We're taught that the reason that we don't have wealth is because we spend too much money, we don't know how to manage money. None of that's true, like absolutely false. The reason that we don't have money and wealth is because of discrimination. Because there were laws put in place that did not allow us to buy homes back in the 60s when they were cheap and when they gave them to everybody else but Black folks. And they had whole communities that were built where they discriminated against us legally. That's the reason today that we are far behind. But we're focusing on closing that racial wealth gap. And it's important for us to, to distill the myths. It's not because we spend too much, it's because we need to be paid the same amount for the same job. It's not because, we didn't, years ago make investments in homes and all that kind of stuff, because we couldn't buy a home. And we couldn't buy a home in any community in some cases, and then we couldn't buy a home across the railroad tracks in a lot of cases. So we really have to dispel the myths and recognize that we're here today because of discrimination. However, with financial literacy, with us focusing on building wealth in our communities, we can thrive. And really the difference today between the have and the have-nots is whether or not you know the game of money. And we have to teach our children about money.
And to your point, Terry, about not having a generational heads up, we had whole towns and cities that were burnt to the ground because of the economic sustainability that we created for ourselves. We can look at Rosewood, we can look what happened in Tulsa, which is where my maternal family is from, to see we had built wealth.
Yes.
And that's back to
that opportunity. Absolutely. When Black Wall Street, when we were given the opportunity, one of the things people don't understand is why was Black Wall Street in Oklahoma? The reason is, and I tell you, my husband is, his family's from Oklahoma. And the reason that it was in Oklahoma is because we were connected to they called them the 5 civilized tribes, and because we were connected to those, we got the 40 acres and a mule in Oklahoma. And we took those 40 acres and a mule and we built Black Wall Street, and then they burned it to the ground. But again, given the opportunity, we will build wealth. And that's what's happening today.
Last question on this. I feel like getting the information out, right, into our communities around how to build wealth, how to maintain it, how to start. Even if you're putting away $200 a month, how to start. I mean, I feel like we have to really extend ourselves and get out there and make sure that message is out there, because we can all build it. It's there.
Absolutely. One of the things that, wealthy people know is that it has to be automatic. you have to set up an automatic savings plan. It has to not go in your pocket. If it goes in your pocket, you're more likely to spend it. It's got to go from your paycheck to a savings account, to a 401k, to some place where you don't see it, and invest it someplace else, and then it will grow. And that's something that, well, we have a tendency to want to try to, put it in our pocket and then save it. That's just too hard. Wealthy people know that's not how you do it. You have to set up an automatic savings plan. I say the other thing that we need to know is that we need to buy a house. Home ownership is key. I always say, even if you have to buy a hut, okay, it may not be your dream house. In fact, it won't be your dream house, but start by buying something. And so that's the other aspect of building wealth. Insurance, you mentioned insurance. That's something that it's cheap. You can, you think about it. If my parents, my grandparents had insurance, they could have left me that as a generational wealth builder. We all need to have some form of insurance so that we are protecting the next generation. So those are just some 3 things: that savings, buying a home, and having insurance. Those are foundations for wealth building.
Saving.
Crystal, can I jump in with that a little bit, please?
Absolutely, Charlene, please.
Yeah. I think that is absolutely correct. And I want to marry these 2 pieces together, the power, the political power, and the financial literacy, because, and the history, right? Because the history that you gave is so important, because one of the things that we talk about is that the greatest suppression mechanism is depression. To have people believe they can't do it, they cannot actually achieve. And so this narrative about Black people being unable is one of the biggest political depression mechanisms to suppress our participation, right? And so being able to talk about it and historically show what we have been able to do with so little, and still grow our communities, still grow our families, still feed our families. All of that is important. I also want to talk about the fact that it's the organizing of Black power that actually helped to create the Community Reinvestment Act, to push back against banks that were redlining and cutting Black people out of being able to have access. It was the organizing of poor people, many of which were Black people, Black and brown people, that challenged Wells, what was it, H&R Block? Yeah. Or what was it? Was that what it was? I can't remember. Right? Challenged predatory lenders, because they were, the predation on our communities. It's just horrible. It was our poor people that expanded policies that gave access, right? And so we've got to be able to tell the fullness of that story, so that we don't depress and therefore suppress our participation. And I think that would be critical.
And I would also add to that, just the policies that Kamala is coming up with are exactly the economic policies that our community needs. Down payment assistance, support for starting businesses, support for growing, for new families. I mean, these are the kind of policies. And the reason that she can come up with those is because she has walked the walk. I always say, I say this to my kids all the time: I can't teach hunger. Like, I grew up hungry. I know what it's like to not have enough money. And so I do things with this bank because I know what it feels like. And my goal is to reduce that feeling in our community. But if you've never been hungry, it's hard to come up with, okay, what does this community need? She knows exactly what we need. When you don't grow up with that, you just think, oh, $50,000 to start a business. Oh, that's not a lot of money. Because, in your world, everybody's got billions, or you talk about, down payment assistance. No, we just need to, get people to, take responsibility and pull themselves up from their bootstraps. No, they need down payment assistance. So I would just tell you that her economic policies are exactly what our community needs.
I second that, Terry. And I would also add that if you haven't been hungry, sometimes you don't even care to come up with a policy that affects those unlike yourself. So you just move on to the next thing that helps the people that you're used to dealing with, and others are just left out of the fray. So thank you for breaking down her economic policy, because I do think it's important that people understand that it is a worthy one, it is a good one, it's a well thought out one based on experience. Right. Yeah. So thank you.
One of the final things that I would offer is we often talk about financial literacy and the importance of understanding that both at the individual level, but it's also important to understand global economic literacy too on how money works, right? And Terry, that's what you were also speaking to as well on how money doesn't come into our communities and what's required on supporting, Black businesses and, engaging locally and how that actually matters in providing jobs. And if you do have the privilege of owning property on what might it take to take into full account what someone's personal circumstances might be and not necessarily their credit score? And again, how do we offer empathy and
Mhm.
flexibility and trust in our community? If we don't, then who will?
Mhm. And sometimes it's not even that expensive. Like I talk to business owners and I say, do you own you? And they look at me like I'm crazy. And I'm like, no, you're building a business on a name. Do you own that name? Do you own the URL? Do you own the trademark? I mean, because it's not that expensive. It's only a few $1,000s to actually do a trademark, hire an attorney and do a trademark registration. And so it's really important for us to understand intellectual property ownership as well. I mean, we own One United, we own Bank Black, we own Buy Black. I mean, these are trademarks that we own because for one, we didn't want anybody else outside of our community to own.
Somebody else.
Yeah, exactly. But also, we recognize the importance of intellectual property as well.
Well stated. Well stated. Well, we've talked about economics, we've talked about vulnerability, we've talked a little bit about our history. I'd like to talk a little bit about strategies for change, right? Participation matters. I hate when I'm with friends or friends of friends and they're complaining, whether it's our political process or this, but they're not participating, they're not engaging. I always say, so what did how have you engaged yourself in this? What information have you sought to fix this issue? So participation matters. And if we don't participate and make our voices heard, then how can we expect to make a difference in our respective areas of expertise, no matter what your expertise is? Whether you're behind the scenes or in front of the scenes, participation matters. There are several strategic models out there. There are several avenues in which we can empower each other as African Americans and specifically as African American women in our fight for change. I'd like to explore some ideas around our foundational strategies for change as Black women. Now that's broad, I understand, but Charlene, I'd like to hear your thoughts on that, about strategies for change and how we can empower others to actually effectuate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. I come out of the grassroots community organizing movement, right? And so for me as an organizer, participation is the key component. Like we teach people that our power rests in our ability to participate collectively. And that's important too, because one of the things that we also have to break free of is this isolation of individualism, because we then begin to start thinking that we are the problem. There is something about when you are in conversation with your neighbor, when you realize that you are sharing the same reality, that you begin to actually open up space to say, wait a minute, if this is not only me and not just about me, what is actually happening here? And that creates some possibility for us to imagine or vision or dream a different reality. And so doing the community organizing is a key component of that participation, breaking the isolation, because a lot of us as women too feel a level of shame. If we have encountered our lives in a way that others would actually scorn or turn their nose up.
Mhm.
So I do a lot of work with formerly incarcerated women, some of the most brilliant, well organized. I don't know how we have been able to even do some of the work that these women have done. And they move through processes that actually put upon them deep shame. And so one of the organizations that I do work with, and I'm just so blessed that they've, brought me into their process, is the Center for Justice at Columbia University, and they do a Right to Heal. Right meaning WRITE as well as a RIGHT, where they've created an entire production called Mask Off,
Mhm.
because we operate with these masks based on the fact that society has told us we're supposed to be a certain way, even though the systems aren't structured for us to even get there. And so being able to do that work together and identify how those systems are actually operating against us, and being able to dream about something different and collectivize ourselves to do that work, is an important part, I believe, of participation. Because when I'm feeling like I don't want to do it,
Yeah.
I'm sitting in a room with 30 other folk that are saying, "Girl, you better do it because we got to get this thing done." And so, it's that collective power that we build together that I think is really, really critical, and it can help cut through so much of the isolation, the shame, and the we might not be able to do it, kind of talk that we give to ourselves. And so I think that's one of the key and most important mechanisms for us to get real power and make something happen.
Agreed. Dr. Brown, I've been reading lately that a lot of young Black women do not feel connected, right? And they don't see the value in participation in whatever form that looks like. I'd love for you to be able to speak to that. Are you aware of this issue? Did you know this was out here? I feel like you were. And I'm concerned about it. So I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I'm concerned about it as well. And, it goes back to this reality that we have a system that often reminds us of the people who matter and who's a nobody. And Terry, I hear you quote Malcolm X's um, often, that if you want to know the most disrespected
Oh,
person, it is a Black woman. Well, it starts very early. It doesn't just start with women, it starts with girls. And we are talking about girls, young women who have come through systems that have crushed their spirit through their educational systems, moving in and out of life every single day. And so when you take away the things that have been censored, when you take away our history, when they get to witness the dehumanizing of something that's so amazing as a first Black Supreme Court justice.
mm, mm, mm.
What hope are we offering? What are we signaling to young Black women about participation in our democracy? What are we speaking to? The overturning of Roe. What are we saying? If we are stripping our young women of their choices as they are moving into adulthood, and in most instances, hey, I'm a mother. I am a mother of 4. And my daughters, I think one of them is on here now, would say, my mother told me this and I had to go by her rules, and on and on and on. When they are moving into adulthood where they can make the choices and they're not even there for them to make anymore,
Right.
what are we doing? We had our young people say, I am buried in my student loan debt. Right? We need some student loan debt relief. There were possibilities for that. And then those were, sort of stripped away. Everybody's still trying to figure out, like, what does that mean? Some of our young Black women, there was the only avenue to go to school to be strapped with student loan debt. And so what is the counter? How are we engaging with them? How are we educating them? Hit Strategies, they do an amazing job at polling for polling period, but specifically around the Black community and around generational polling, some of the best that I have seen over the last several years and through many partnerships that we have had in various different stages of work. And they just had a session within the last couple of weeks. And what they were offering is that what they're seeing now for young Black women is what they saw several years back on the disengagement that we were seeing for Black men. Right. And so what does that say that we must do? How are we talking to our young Black people? How are we making meaning of what's happening? How are we connecting to, how are we, our Sankofa moment, how are we looking back to the past and taking forward what we need to offer the encouragement, to offer, what's ahead and what the possibilities are, and giving some examples. Most of these young folks, they were not around the excitement of Barack Obama,
Yeah.
right? And the sort of yes, we can. Crystal, you were there. Terry, you were there. You remember, what that propelled for us. And even now, Kamala is fighting. Is fighting to get over the finish line, and it needs all of us, to be in it, to help make this a reality. We heard back in 2020 that we have to give young folks, we have to give everybody, but it's particularly young folks, something to fight for and not just something to fight against.
Well stated, Terry.
Yes, yeah, so many things come to my mind. So I'm reminded of Sabrina Fulton, Trayvon Martin's mom, who always says this, and I tell her this, that I repeat it all the time: do your part. That's her message. Do your part. That part, it depends on, your circumstances, what you can do. It could be lending a hand to a family member. It could be community organizing, but do your part. And, one of the things that, I have found very important about what we do at One United is we support Urban View Sirius Radio. A lot of people heard me on Karen Hunter and, Joe Madison, the late Joe Madison. But the reason that we support them is because they're doing their part. They are putting out good information, accurate information about Black people and what we could be doing. And so for me, it's like, I'm gonna put my money where my mouth is. And that's one way in which we are gonna do our part. I think the other, message that we need to also send across, even though we're talking about power shift and Black women, we need to also talk about Black men and Black boys. And Black boys, and I'm married to a Black man. I'm the daughter of a Black man. I got a Black son. Black men are in my life. Got uncles, friends, and their power as well. And so there's always this sort of belief that it's one or the other. It's like Black women or Black men, and it's like no, and it's Black people, men, women, boys, girls, and we need to lift each other up. And we need to support each other. I own this bank with my husband. He is a partner with me on this mission. And so we need to figure out how to change the story, don't let them sort of divide us and try to make it seem like, we're in competition or that we don't, if we're talking about Black women, then, what about Black men? No, we're talking about the importance of Black women, but we also know the importance of Black men and their participation.
Yes, not at the expense of Black men or at the expense of anyone. That's not how we
of anyone. Exactly.
That's never how we have.
I would add too that we have to stop letting other people define or make meaning of who we are.
Yes.
Who our people are, right? So I think I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say, well, what did Barack Obama do for Black people? And I'm going to myself, you kidding me right now. I give my mama a look like, what? Like, you got to be kidding. Or like you said when we began this conversation, the misinformation around Kamala, because we have to stop allowing other folk to tell us how we feel about ourselves, our community,
Mhm.
our work, our people, our leaders. Like, we've got to make those determinations ourselves. And, one of the things that this is one of the things that sticks in my craw right now around the Kamala piece and being a prosecutor. As I said, I work with formerly incarcerated people, and there were folks that were really not happy around the felon framework because there was years of movement to actually have people talk about directly impacted folks, returning citizens, justice impacted, formerly incarcerated, etc. And so, so that's valid. That was a really valid narrative critique. And we should really pay attention to that. And because we can hold two things at the same time. And, I also know that if you hear her speak, her motivation for protecting women, protecting girls that have been violated, and making that a commitment when you have young girls who, 80 plus, maybe 90 some percent of them have been violated before the age of 18. So what do you do about that? When you have formerly incarcerated women, most of whom are incarcerated because of violations to them, not because of what they have done, right? Economic violations, mental health violations, physical and abuse violations. So we need to hold both of these things. And so when I hear people say, well, that still be a problem because she's a prosecutor, I'm like, guess what? I'm sitting here thinking, I'm glad somebody's fighting for me. Now can be a conversation about how that fight needs to happen in a way that we all can succeed and thrive, right? And so, but we have to stop letting folks tell us how we need to be with each other. We're family. We're a community.
I heard that story recently. I don't know if you all saw it, where the woman was talking about how there were these three frogs in a hole, and they were trying to jump out, and people were saying, "You can't jump out, you can't jump out." And two of the frogs, ended up dying, and they didn't, jump out. And third frog jumped out, and they were like, "Ooh, ooh, how'd you do that?" And if they realized that the frog was deaf. And so, and that, you realize that you're hearing this, I can't do this, I can't do this, always in your head. You need to not let that, stop you from moving forward. Like, what do you mean I can't do it? In fact, for some people that spurs them on, but for other people, it's just dispiriting. And we need to not listen to that. You're absolutely right, Shirley. Like, let's not let them, define who we are or put that negativity in our head.
That's spot on. And to your point, Charlene, I think it's also incumbent upon us who know the facts around her prosecutorial record to amplify what we know, to talk about it, get it out there. Even if you're just talking to 3 or 4 people about it, let them know what her record is, because at least, you get the facts out there and it's clear, right? So there's some amplification that we have to do on our end, which this is perfect. And I want to say to everybody listening out there, first of all, thank you. We see all of your questions and we are going to get to them. We have one more topic to discuss, and then we're going to get right over to your questions. And I thank you because I'm going to be reading as many as I can. We'll get to them right after this next question. We just talked about misnomers, misinformation, collectively holding each other up, Black women, Black men, our Black families. So that leads into our sort of our final topic, which is collective mobilization and political engagement. As you all know, political engagement is wildly important, especially given the times we are living in, and being aware of how politics intersects with your daily life is paramount. I could easily point to what's going on with women's reproductive rights nationally and how it has a disproportionate effect. You said this earlier, Charlene, it has a disproportionate effect on our communities. Disproportionate effect. Awareness, right? Awareness of who is running for office, even in the place where you live. Awareness that Kamala Harris was only the second Black woman to be a U.S. senator, and that we have Lisa Blunt Rochester out there and my dear friend Angela Alsobrooks, who would be 4 and 5, with LaFonza Butler being number 3. We have to be aware of those numbers. That's not a lot, and we need their voices in those chambers. We need their voices, and we require their voices to add perspective to the legislation that's being contemplated, that's being passed, that ultimately may affect our communities. So we have to be gathering and making sure that we are aware of what's going on politically on a national level and on a local level. So there is power in that. There's power in our numbers, and there's powers in our knowledge. And Jasmine Crockett has taught us that there's power in our words.
That's
So,
right.
you know what I mean? So Black women are always shaping political change, and we will continue to shape political change. Dr. Brown, your thoughts on being aware and politically engaged, and us coming together to be politically engaged to promulgate change.
Yeah, I would say at this juncture, we cannot afford not to be politically engaged.
That's right.
Our lives depend on it.
Mhm.
In so many ways, our lives depend on it. The choices and our freedoms are not guaranteed because there are people who are committed to rolling back any advance that we've had, exposing all of our vulnerabilities. And again, we have a system that reminds us who matters and a system that says that we are nobody. And that is enacted every single day. And if we sit back and do nothing, then we can't complain about it.
Mm.
Right. And so I'd say that we have to stay right. No one has to be like a political science major and everything politics. How about just engaging in real conversation, that matters, right? Again, we didn't have deep levels of education. We had deep levels of care about our future. We had deep levels of care about our community and what was happening, around us. We're taxpayers, regardless as to what tax bracket that we're in, that contribute to our local economies, that contribute to our federal economies. We have a right as citizens to weigh in, to take a vote. Why would we give that away? For free.
That for free, particularly when so many people fought for us to even have the right to participate.
That's right.
Right? So at least take the time to understand what's going on around you politically. I said to someone the other day, yes, I'll get you a yard sign, but yard signs don't win elections.
Right. Voting.
Voting.
And there are some people who can't vote because their rights have been taken away, that hadn't been restored.
Right.
And so an act of radical Black love
Yeah.
is participating
Yep,
in
participating.
our democracy in the best ways that we can. And sometimes it has to be incremental if we have not been fully active, but you have to make strides. You have to continue to work at it. If you don't, then someone will be working at it against you. And we can't afford, for that to happen. I can't afford
Right.
for you to not participate.
That's right. That's right. Terry, what do you think?
Yeah, I was gonna tell
Yeah.
a story that it still gives me chills. So I was a young kid, I went to Brown University from Indiantown, Florida. It was like a total shock culturally for me. And I was sitting in a political science class. I had never even heard of political science, but I decided, okay, I'm gonna try this class. And I remember the professor, Professor Cobb. I remember even the way he looked. And he was teaching basically I was the only Black kid in the class. He was teaching these white boys about, mainly boys, there were women there too, but basically how to be a leader and how to win elections. And I remember him specifically saying, don't worry about Black folks, they don't vote.
Mm.
I mean, I'm like 18 years old. I'm sitting here, the only Black, kid in this class, and I'm looking around like, oh shoot. He said, don't worry about the Black community because they don't vote. And I'm like, we need to prove him wrong. We've already proven him wrong many times with, but we need to continue to prove him wrong. But that just stuck with me. And I feel like there is a need for us to not take our own voice, vote for granted. It's a right that we have, but it's also a privilege that we should use.
Right.
And it's free, So have a plan, have a voting plan. How are you going to vote? I was on this conference call just last night, Win with Black Women. And they were like, what's your plan? What's your voting plan? We all need a vote plan.
Right.
Yeah.
And we all have to do our part. Charlene, we all have to do our part in this effort. If you can't vote, you can knock on a door or two. You can pass out information. You can make 10 calls. There are ways to participate. You can drive people to the polls, but we all have to do our part. It's near and dear to my heart. Charlene, what are you thinking down there? I see you. I know you have things to say.
Well, my mantra is that the personal is political and the political is personal. And so we have to really do a good job of having folks understand that every single bit of our life is actually wrapped up in the one place that we have authority and power, and that's in government. That is the place of our authority and power. I remember Ron Dellums talking about how we need to be thinking about Congress and our role in it as we are the board of directors over this massive organization that has the resources that can do for our communities. And so how do we function in that way? And I really think that the one thing I would say is that we do talk about voting, but we don't tell people that they're voting because this is their controlling interest in this massive organ that actually has the resources to fundamentally shift what happens in our communities.
Right.
And so I think that is the piece, and we're still fighting for that. We wouldn't be fighting to vote if they didn't understand how important the vote was. And that's it. That is our controlling interest. And when we give that up, we give up our ability to determine how those resources are going to be used for us. And what then happens is that it's used against us. It's used to actually make our lives miserable. It's used to make us unhealthy. It's used to make our communities polluted. And so what would happen if we said, we don't want that for ourselves. We want something different. And we're going to sit at that seat of decision making through that vote and begin to talk about what it is we're going to do differently. So,
this conversation we've sort of talked about being unseen and unheard, and the way our narrative, Charlene, I'm going to use that how our narrative, how we want it to be espoused. In talking about Kamala for 2 seconds, when we're thinking about Black women as they tell our story, and we're angry and we're this and we're that, and here we have this candidate who is more than qualified, right? I'm not even going to get into that because we know how qualified she is, but that she's excited, she's happy, she's joyful. And they still use that against her. I love your thoughts on this because I'm just perplexed. I'm like, okay, 1 minute you have us over in this column because we're protecting our mental health half the time, to be honest with you. And now we have this intelligent, happy, childless woman. I shouldn't say childless because she is a stepmother, and that does count. That I can speak to.
Yeah.
This woman who has all this joy in her laughter, and you can feel it. She laughs from the chest. That's that narrative that we're talking about. And who's creating that narrative? I'm sorry, it popped in my head. I wanted to throw that out at you. Terry, what are your thoughts on that? Like, what is it?
It's funny. We started this conversation and I said I was coming with anger, but I'm also coming with joy. and it's like joy and pain, right? Maze. I mean, the reality is that one of the ways that we build our community and build ourselves is to focus on the positive aspects of our lives, which are plentiful.
Right.
Like I said, we've come a long way. We only been free for 60 years, and look how far we've come. So it's not that we don't have, a lot of work to do. And it's not as though we're not, underestimating all the things that, sort of piss me off. But at the same time, I do feel joy. And I do think her joy is real. And we all feel it. We know that this country, there are more of us than there are of them. I'm just going to repeat that. There are more of us than there are of them. If you look at the popular vote, she's going to win the popular vote. I mean, there are more of us than there are of them. And so, and the reason is that this is an amazing country, that we have accomplished a lot of things. And the stuff that they're describing, about the immigrants and all this crazy stuff that they've had to come up with to, just make up stories, we know it's not true. And we are ready to turn the page, as she always talks about. We're ready to turn the page. We're tired of the lies. We're tired of the craziness that's been going on. I am sick and tired of being sick and tired, of hearing these lies. And so I do feel that the joy is real, and that it can be there while we also work on the pain points. Right. And that's what I would call them, pain points.
That's the balance. That's the balance. Well, listen, thank you.
Can I jump in on that piece?
Yeah,
I just want to jump in there.
Absolutely.
Because I'm remembering Du Bois in his Black Reconstruction, and he talked about the fact that Black people had endured so much with grace and love, and they just talked about us so badly. But the minute we picked up a gun, meeting in the Civil War, then all of a sudden we're men. Right. And that's important because this country is such a violent place. And one of the most revolutionary things you can do is actually move from joy and love, to dream, to have faith, to think future. And that's why they are so pissed, because Kamala is moving in a counter-revolutionary way that is grounded in our history and culture of possibility. And they don't know what to do with that because it's on full display, out loud laughter. We ain't doing it in the basement, in the backyard. It is. And so I think everybody that goes to vote should go whistling. They should go singing. They should skip to the polls. I want to drive them crazy. We're going to start electric sliding right to the vote. That's it.
That's great.
I would offer, something, very similar, right? So the narrative changes, right? There's this expectation that we are as violent, as cruel, and as mean. We are looking over the future horizon, right? You treat us so bad. The expectation is that we will retaliate.
Oh, yes.
And we will be just as awful, right? And you continue to change the goalposts. But the reality is this is our lived experience from the beginning of time, right? And so the institutions and the microaggressions, I mean, we just got language for it now, but just living as a professional, regardless as to what profession that you're in, living as a working woman, as a working mother, as a working spouse, as a Black person in America. This is your experience. When you accomplish something, they change the goalposts. I remember I was working very hard as a working mom, right? And it was like, well, you need to have this level of experience to get this promotion. Okay, I get this experience working really hard, making big sacrifices for my children, because I know if I make some more money, then things will get better, right? Did it, and then they changed the goalposts, right? You have to get an MBA in order to get this promotion. Guess who gets an MBA? Well, you you don't really need an MBA to have this job. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get a promotion or more money, but we've lived this before, right? And again, it's to throw us off our game, but we are prepared. We are ready. And we talked about resilience, but yes, it's a little bit of resilience, but it's also preparedness. It's preparedness generation after generation after generation. And one thing that I always remind folks that know me well, like if this is the hardest thing that I have to do, well, then I'm okay because the hard stuff is behind me, right? So we're looking future forward, looking over the future horizon, and I got some folks behind me pushing me, and we have to do our part and to push her, whatever we have, some doubts about, well, we can hold her accountable to that on the other side, because that's the only way that it happens.
Well stated. Well stated. Well, with that, we
With
can
that.
go to our Q&A. And Dr. Brown, this first question is for you.
Oh,
Hey, yes. KMB, can you speak to how Black women's leadership, goes right to what you just said, is perceived in comparison to traditional leadership models? How does it differ in approach, appearance, and the ways in which it engages and empowers communities?
Traditional meaning white, traditional meaning male. That's how I hold traditional. But what I would say is Black women, I mean, we lead from our experience. I mean, Terry, talked about it earlier. If you have experience, we don't leave our experience, at the table, right? We know how hard it may have been to make the track, right? And, if what you think, what you do, and what you say are all cut from the same cloth, well, then you're moving with some intentionality around values and trust, right? And so there is perhaps what I'm hoping, what we hold as a unique blend of resilience, empathy, and authenticity. Not the stuff marketers are trying to tell you, but authenticity, that you are doing the right thing, you're connected to humanity. And a lot of times those traditional models don't do that, right? It's just like, what do we, doing everything at all costs, right? Without paying attention to the casualties along the way. And I have not experienced Black women making priorities in that way, not the successful Black women. So, connecting on common values, fostering, inclusivity and, collaboration. Those are things that are transformative and empowering. We don't just get people to do stuff for us because we say. We have to build the relationship. We have to build the trust. We have to not be afraid to stand out and speak the truth and create the space for other people to do it as well. We mobilize communities. So we mobilize the communities and people in which we want to lead, both in workplaces and and in other places. And we inspire, not by discipline, but inspire because we lead with power and pride and confidence. And I think that's different
Yeah.
from the traditional model of leadership.
Thank you. Our next question is for Terry. As a Black woman in the C-suite, what are you looking forward to with an anticipated Black woman POTUS? How would it impact your presence in boardrooms and in conversations?
That's a good question. I do think about it. I live it and I think about it all the time. What I'm looking forward to is seeing more of us in the C-suite, in the boardrooms, seeing more of us really being recognized for our intellect, our contributions, but as well as, really what Dr. Brown talked about, the experiences that we bring to the table. And I can tell you in all the, I've, started, from a small town, family didn't have a lot of money to, seeing tremendous wealth. And I can tell you that there are smart people in both places. And that it's, and that we need to really recognize sort of the power of our intellect throughout our community and give them opportunities to lead. So what I look for is more leadership from Black women as we move into this next phase, I would say, of our journey. And what I would also say is that what has been inspiring, even though I have known, because we have offices in California, I've seen the rise of Kamala from back in the AG days and all of that, and seeing her today. What I didn't expect was how well she would be received.
Yeah.
I did not expect the degree to which not that she wasn't fabulous, but that people would see it. And so I really look forward to them seeing more of all, in all of us. And I think that her journey is our journey, and I'm looking forward to more of it.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Charlene, we do have a question here for you. Can you speak to how important organizing is to the Black community, organizing by Black women, especially in a time when our community is under attack?
Yeah, one thing that I would say is that organizing in the Black community has always been, deeply led by Black women. Whether we're talking about, Harriet Tubman, or if we're talking about Stacey Abrams. I mean, we've got a whole line. And if I was in my church community, I'd say it's a Mary, Mother of Jesus. So we come from a long line of Black women that have done this work, and it is critical. And I think, going back to both what Carrie and Terry said, that it is that deep commitment to our communities, deep commitment to our future, an unapologetic and deep commitment that will confront anything, confront anything to move us forward. And I love the Harriet Tubman piece. I play Cynthia Erivo's Stand, all the time for folks, because I like that image of Harriet having the gun. And the reason why I like it, not because I'm a gun owner, now, so I'm actually afraid of guns, but the idea that there are people that will get scared. There are people that will want to turn back. There are people that would just not be quite sure. Now, and how do you actually say to folks, I know you're scared, but if you turn back, you are impacting the entire community. So you got to move forward. And I think that understanding of how we hold each other, how we hold community, how we hold in the face of so much. I mean, let's look at what Kamala's enduring. She's enduring things that are hard. If just imagine what she is enduring and still pressing, still pressing, right? And that, I think, is that historic arc. And we need to stand in it. We need to embrace it. We need to claim it with pride. And then ask ourselves what you said, Crystal, and now how do I plant myself based on where I am, what my gifts are, and where my joy comes from to be a part of that historic arc. And so I think that's the big question. This is what we do. We just need to follow along our heritage and then embrace it fully.
Right on. I mean, look, that's exactly right. And embrace it fully. Charlene, this next question is also for you. How can we encourage first-time young people around the importance or about the importance of their vote?
Yeah, I think we've been talking about that all night long, right? And so I do think that the one thing that COVID showed us was that one person, their one network can impact millions. And so I do think that it is not an individual vote. We have to begin to start saying we are an interconnected web. And that, that our you mentioned this, Carrie, our survival, our very essence, our ability to thrive actually rests on our ability to like divorce ourselves from this is only about me
Right.
to what must I do because I care about everybody around me. One of the things that I think is that we challenge people to do, write your network down. Who do you talk to? Who's your stylist? Who does your nails? Who do you talk to as you're on the bus stop? When people actually see the amount of people they touch, who's a part of their network, all of a sudden they realize that it's not their one vote. They have the ability
Mhm.
to impact and have this like ripple effect, a viral ripple effect beyond TikTok. Like literally just the fact that I talk to you and you talk to someone and they've talked to someone else. And I think that once we begin to understand the power of our networks, like we're a communal people. You imagine the kind of networks we have? And so I think young people, especially, oh my God, yeah, my grandson is 15. He posts 16. He posts. I'm like, I think I have a handle. Well, how does that happen? But because they're in relationship with people all over the country through their video games, they are in relationship with people all over the country. And so imagine if we told some 20-something-year-old to organize your Minecraft people and see if they're registered to vote. So just really thinking about how people are touching each other and it's going from that space outward, I think would be important.
I mean, Charlene, you mentioned it. So just the basic tenets, meeting people where they are and
Yes,
not in isolation, right?
yes. Say more, Carrie. You jumped in. Come on,
Yeah.
girl.
I'm giving her this next one. I'm gonna give her this next question.
Meeting people where they are, right?
Meeting
And
people where they are.
the thing about organizing is that you don't have to do it alone, like you're doing it with someone, right? Harriet Tubman had a group of people, not just, one single person and a collection of allies helping along the way.
Yes. Yeah.
Really, that's a great point. Dr. Brown, this next question is for you, and it may be for all of us, quite frankly. This is the question. I'm consistently amazed at how Kamala radiates joy and excellence, while her competitor can go low and attack her name, ethnicity, etc. As a Black woman, it's tough to take this in. It feels personal. Dr. Brown, it says, how are you all managing your personal well-being until we cross the finish line? Great question. Great question.
Every Friday at 10 o'clock, I spend time with my therapist. I don't mess around. I take my well-being, my mental health. It's important, right? Because this stuff can be maddening. The reality is that we all have these experiences, and it sort of brings up, I don't like the word like triggers, but it brings up something like where do you go? I mean, Charlene and I talked about this recently. It was like the attacks, and we've experienced this. Like you have to prove yourself more. Like I've been in organizations that have hired me to do the very thing that I'm a genius at doing. They pay me a lot of money to do it, and it was like, well, what's your plan? I don't know what the plan is. I just got here. But you've had this person in this role for the last 10 years and they never had a plan. Can I get like 90 days to figure it out? Right. And so, I mean, it's just stuff like that, the microaggressions, the disrespect. There's been times that I showed up. I mean, even before, like we had LinkedIn pages, and the way that my name is spelled is the male version of Carrie. I showed up one place, and they was expecting a white male for a job interview and told me that the job was no longer available. I'm sorry, what? And the white woman that came for a job, she had an ethnically sounding name, and she went back to interview. Right. I mean, so it's things like that, like these different expectations for different people. And, I've researched this for decades as part of my scholarship. So anyway, I see a therapist every week. I have for 10 years, right? Not sure if it's working. Like every time I runs out on my calendar, I was like, oh, I thought I would be fixed by now. And we just sort of laugh and add another 6 months for, the same time, same day and keep it. But you have to take care of yourself. If I don't take care of me, nobody else will. And I have people that are counting on me to take care of them. And so that's my answer. I have to take care of me, and I have to, do my part in helping other people to move through it, as well, sort of not back away. Try not to personalize it and, you know, get my own care.
Thank you. Terry, how do you deal with the constant attacks and watching her take these blows?
Yeah. So one of the things I do for self-care is I walk every morning. And I listen to a podcast or music, and that's my, sort of therapeutic process. And I have to give a shout out to my current podcast.
Uh-oh. I think Terry froze. So while we're waiting for her, Charlene, what is your self-care routine, or how do you deal? Terry, you froze for a second there.
Oh,
Can
sorry.
you have it back?
Okay.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm sorry. So I know I looked. So I was saying that what I do is I walk every morning. I listen to podcasts, and the one that I'm listening to now, I would highly recommend, which is The Wonder of Stevie.
Mm.
And it's about our Stevie Wonder, and it took me back to the music that, we all enjoyed as, growing up, and he's just amazing and a genius. So I do that. That's one of the things I do for, mental health. But I will also say that I have the fortune, and I recommend this to, to young people. I have the fortune of being passionate about what I do. I wake up every morning excited. I feel like I haven't worked a day in my life. Banking is my passion. Bringing banking to our community is my passion. And so, to me, this isn't a job. But I will say that I am a little scared. I talk about anger, I talk about joy, I'm gonna talk about fear. I am a little afraid, because to me, this election is who I think is, I'll call it on trial, is America.
Mm.
I think that, the result of this election is going to really show who we really are as a country.
Yeah.
And I'm a little fearful, but I'm also optimistic because I, go back to there's more of us than them. We just have to make sure we, Charlene, get organized and make sure people get to the polls. But it's just amazing that it's even a tight race, given the negativity, the racism, the sexism, the everything. I mean, really. I talked about this too. I know there's a concern about Palestine and Gaza, but I'm thinking to myself, if you think the other side cares about the Muslim community, the first thing he did when he was a president was to created a Muslim ban. I'm like, he was putting kids in cages. I'm like, if you're, Latino, I mean, you think that they're going to distinguish between you as a citizen and those that, they think aren't citizens? I don't understand it, but I am a little fearful. I am a little angry, but I'm also optimistic, and I'm going to listen to Stevie and enjoy my joy.
Mm-hmm.
Charlene, you're on mute. You're on mute. We can't hear you.
You're still on mute.
Very good. We can hear you now.
No, I
No.
can't.
Okay. We'll give her a minute to
Right.
Fix me.
How about you, Crystal? What do you do? What do you do? You're close to her. What do you do? How do you deal with it?
So unfortunately, this is not the right way to, I do try to take care of myself in the form of exercise. But you know what, Terry? I'm numb. I am numb. I am so used to this position. I am so used to the attacks. And as Dr. Brown mentioned, them you get there and then they move the goalposts. They change the game, or they underestimate or talk about her not being qualified. It drives me insane. Or when they talk about her character or her laugh or whatever it may be, her past, I get quiet and I sort of just put my blinders on because that's what I'm used to doing. Just as a Black woman living in this world. I put my blinders on and I stay focused on, okay, Crystal, you know how this is, you know what it is. So continue to do the work. The problem with that is that it does build up. It's not healthy. I try to release it in a walk or in Pilates or even having a good fun day with my kids or calling my mom and talking it through. But I shut down because I'm just so used to tuning out all the noise in my day-to-day as a Black woman. Case in point, and then I'm going to move back to our final question. I am on a board here, a fairly significant board here in Miami, and they had an event on Sunday. I invited my girlfriends to join me at this event. We had a VIP table. We are enjoying our meal. We are having lunch. This Caucasian lady sits down to my left. Well, it's my table, but okay, ma'am, you'll have to move over one. She moves over one, and then she says, "Can you get me a napkin? Do you work here?" She
Not
said, "Me?" And then she says it to my girlfriend sitting next to me. Now, how I respond, I mean, I was like, I had to go in a little bit, but I'm used to it. And so I try to block it out. I try to be healthy, but I also just put my blinders on. That's how I deal with it. Charlene, do we have you back?
Do you have me back?
We
Yeah,
do.
welcome back.
We do.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm technologically challenged. And if my brother's in this meeting, he's laughing at me right now because he
Don't
knows.
laugh. Don't laugh at her.
But yeah, I really appreciate this question because I cried.
Hmm.
I mean, I cried. And then I realized that I was having low-key depression because of everything that she was encountering. For all of the reasons you all mentioned. I was seeing myself, all of the things, all of the attacks, all of the everything. It was every single day. And it was non-ending. And you just felt it. And you just felt as though there were moments when I felt as though, okay, if I say the wrong thing, I'm going to mess her up. Even though I'm not even in a place to mess her up, I'm just like, we got to hold it tight. We have to make sure we don't mess it up. So, I think that we do have to recognize that this is impacting us emotionally.
Yeah.
It really, really is. And so, I love getting therapy, taking walks, listening to music. I sat around with my cousins walking down music memory lane on Sunday. It was one of the best things I've done in a long time. And so really being intentional about this, being in community, hearing from other women, other Black women that this is not, and I'm being explicit, other Black women, that we are not alone. This is not isolated. This is real.
Yeah.
I understand gaslighting in ways I had never understood it before in this moment. So I think community is the best medicine.
That's right. Well, thank you. Listen, we've got one more question. This is for the entire panel. And I think this is a nice sort of summation of the night. So with that, Terry, what is your definition? How would you define, what do you see as the power shift?
Mm,
What
mhm.
is the power shift? What does that mean to you?
So what it means to me is us being recognized for the power that we already have. We already have it. We've had it. We've had it for generations. I think the shift is just that it's being better recognized, something that has always been there. So it's really a shift in the world because we've been here. We've been powering through, we've been getting stuff done. Sorry, I was getting ready to use a curse word. But it's really the world recognizing our power. And it's also young folks using their power because we've been using it and we need them to use it as well.
Thank you.
Vote.
Charlene, what does power shift? What is power shift? How do you define it? How do you see that? What is that to you?
I love this question. I'm going to focus on the shift piece because that means movement. And so I see the power shift as a movement. I agree with Terry. It's a claiming. It's not anything new. It is a stance. It is a claiming. It is saying that there's something new in town. Pay attention. That's what I would say is a power shift.
Like that. And our architect, Dr. Brown.
Yeah, I would say if we had not necessarily a theme song, but something that comes to mind is LL Cool J's "Don't Call It a Comeback." We've been here for years, right? And so, I mean, just thinking about that. So reclaiming our power. We have something that the world is now able to witness, and it's powerful and it's transformative, right? And it's something that has been in the making, right? And there's been hints to it and cultural references over, the last, several years. Now there have been a ton of challenges, as well. And there's a bunch of markers and signs around how much work that there is to do. But we are making progress and we are representing that progress, and other people are paying attention whether they like it or not.
That's right. That's right. Well, listen.
Crystal, I want to hear your answer. What do you see? Yes, we turn it back on our wonderful moderator.
Amazing.
Power shift. I see it as the prism has always been bending towards us as Black women because we've always carried the weight of this country on our backs.
Mhm.
We've carried it for our own, and we've carried it for theirs, and we've carried it for our sisters and brothers. And that light has always been there. But now, as we come out of our shells and as we allow ourselves to fly and allow our voices to be heard, that light is shifting. And they're seeing the true power in who we are, not just for our bodies and our lips and all the things they want, but for our minds and how in the face of all of this, we're still here and we still have a voice and we're still strong and we ain't going nowhere. And back to the original point that you made earlier, Terry, when they started to talk about, well, Biden may come out and we're going to think about da-da-da-da. And they flipped it to Kamala and how we came out 2 days later, 100,000 strong on a call on a on a Sunday night.
Monday night.
That we are there. We are here for her. They saw that. That was our power shift. We've been here.
Yeah.
But now they see that light. And so to me, that's what that means. And it is incredibly empowering to me. I often tell people, as a woman, I don't have the luxury to not help other women, but as a Black woman, I don't have the luxury not to support you.
Right.
I do not have the luxury not to support you. We don't have the luxury not to support each other. So the power shift is in us collectively seeing our power and them seeing it too.
Yeah.
That's how I would see it.
Yeah.
But
Black women is not only the right thing to do, but it's also our responsibility as individuals and society.
That's right. We've carried it for so long. We have come to the end of our I don't know when our discussion, because this has been
Conversation.
amazing, our conversation.
Yeah.
If we have room for one more question, if anybody has it, otherwise I was going to open it up to each of the panelists to conclude their thoughts on the evening. And I don't see any additional. So Charlene, would you sort of conclude or give a summary of your thoughts on this discussion and maybe offer some thoughts on how we move forward?
Yes, thank you. I loved what both you and Carrie said in that last bit of we are here, we are going nowhere, and we are the medicine. We are the medicine. You know, we will actually dragging and kicking and screaming. This country is coming with us because we're in the front of it. You know, we're not the ones dragging, but we are dragging this country and it's kicking and screaming, but it is coming, right? Another world is indeed possible. We've been making it every day. And so that is what this is saying to me. Kamala is one illustration of the power and beauty of what happens when that crystallizes in a body, right? And so we are now moving forward. I'm still stuck on we electric slide into the polls. Who's gonna join me? I'm stuck on it. We're gonna
Yes.
that's it. Do it with joy, counter-revolutionary joy, and sing Kamala all the way to the polls. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm leaving with.
All right.
Like that. Terry, how would you summarize this evening? Could you give us some imparting thoughts of wisdom and encouragement and empowerment?
Well, first of all, I thank you, women, fabulous women, for allowing me to be a part of this conversation, and for those that tuned in, because it really has, I've gained perspective from it for myself, and also, thought about some things that that I hadn't fully thought through. So this has been wonderful. I am going to continue to do my part. And I, again, keep going back to Sabrina Fulton's message. I think if all of us continue to do our part, that we have more faith in this country. We believe in actually democracy and the foundation of this country. I'd say more than anyone. And having that faith and continue walking in that faith, I guess is what I would say. And, I'm a spiritual person as well, walking in our faith, that, the arc does bend towards justice, and that we shall, I hate to use all these, we shall overcome, but, but we will. And so I just feel like we just got to continue to do our part, and we will see the promised land. That's it. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Brown.
All right. I would say supporting Black women, again, is not only the right thing to do, it is our responsibility. Supporting Black people in general, Black community, Black businesses, Black organizations, Black men, right, is also very important. We have to do our part between now and November, and after November, we have to continue to do our part. We were built for this. We got this, and we can't, cede our ground. I mean, we are so close, and there's no turning back. Without our work, nobody's going to give it to us. They've shown us who they are. We got to believe them. And there's, like Terry said, there's more of us than them. So how do we make it count? It's been a pleasure being here with all of you. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Crystal, for moderating. Thank you, Dr. Charlene Sinclair.
Yes, thanks to Crystal.
Yeah.
Is saying yes. Thank you, Terry, for your amazing support today and all the days leading up to this. And Crystal, your parting thoughts?
Well, I just want to thank all of you ladies for your different perspectives, your candor, your nurturing, your nourishment. Like this is nourishing for the soul. This is necessary from time to time. We should gather like this more often because it does provide a space for peace, right? And to chat with like-minded women. We might not all be in the same field, but we have the same goals in mind. So I want to thank all of you for all of your opinions and thoughts and for being thought leaders in your communities. Thank you for allowing me to be your moderator tonight. I want to remind everybody that joined us to please do your part, do something. I think do something day is coming up, right?
Hey, we got just 4 weeks, right? Is it just
Yeah,
4
we have less than 30 days to go. I believe it's 20 session. No, this is 27 days. Do something, whatever it is you can.
weeks? Yeah.
Please step up to the plate. We've got one shot to get Kamala Devi Harris across the finish line. I think we can do it if we are collective in our efforts. If you need something to do, you can always make phone calls in the swing states. If you need something to do, and you can make those from the comfort of your home. If you can go to those swing states and knock on doors. That's what she needs. People ask me, what does she need? That's what she needs. So let's get out there. Let's continue making the change. Let's be the change we want to see. And let's watch this power shift light up this country. We got this. So thank you all for coming out tonight and joining us. We appreciate all your questions. We appreciate your time. And let's go do this. Because when we, how did she say it?
When we fight, we win.
We win. Thank you.
We win. Yes. And please follow blackwomenpowershift.com for additional resources and next steps from this event. So thank you so much for coming, blackwomenpowershift.com.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Good night, everyone. See you on the other side.
Other side.
Bye-bye.
Terry, can I be host again?
Yes.